My name is Brett Schurman, and I'm the president and owner of Schurman Executive Recruiting, or as I like to call it, SE Recruit. That's kind of what we're known by and branded by. We are a recruiting firm. I've been in business doing recruiting in distribution, fulfillment, and supply chain for almost 23 years now. It'll be 23 years this September. 16 and a half years with another organization where I got some pretty good training. Then I went out on my own in 2018. We have 3 total employees, so we're a small boutique firm. But again, we specialize in placing people in operations, engineering, facilities and maintenance, MHE, providers, suppliers, integrators, transportation, greater supply chain, and anything from, kind of a management up to a executive level in, again, anything that touches distribution and fulfillment.
All right. Very cool. Well, thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. I wanted to talk with you today because a lot of times when we're designing systems or concepts for people or trying to help them improve their supply chain in some way, one of the questions that tends to come up is getting the right people in the right places, holding on to people. Maybe it's a brownfield and you're changing a bunch of stuff. And a lot of the things that we end up touching or interacting when we automate a facility are going to impact like operations leaders or IT personnel or maintenance personnel. So some of these like highly educated, like very specific technology or technical kind of skill sets. And I know that, and I've crossed paths with you in the past. I know that you know a great number of people in this industry, so I kind of wanted to pick your brain on a couple of concepts around this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, again, I'm happy to share my thoughts and what I've learned throughout the years of doing this. So if you have questions that you want to go with, go for it, or I can jump in and kind of build off what you were just talking about there.
Well, so let's set the stage a little bit. So sometimes we'll look at an operation, and we could be transitioning the operation very often. That's kind of one of our roles as an integrator. From maybe paper picking to adding a WMS in there, or maybe we're going from picking on a walkie rider to putting in a goods to person ASRS. And so some of these sound simple, but they could be a quantum leap in database management or in like maintenance technician skill sets. It's different to have a facilities manager than it is to have an automation manager.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's kind of the framework that we're stepping into here. What are you seeing in these kind of automated sites or sites where they increase automation? What kind of requests are you finding crop up, or what kind of patterns are you seeing in the kind of recruitment side of that business?
Yeah, good question. I think before we get into, or I would kind of comment on the recruiting aspect of it and kind of getting into that, because that is very specialized, and companies do look for people with a very specialized background to help them implement, build off of, continue, and then operate, in a mechanized environment or a much more automated environment. But before you even get there, once an organization has committed to moving from older technology, and call it a paper pick or call it just a simple WMS, for whatever reason, growth, just older, outdated technologies going to new, you got to bring the people along, right? So, there's a retention piece of this before you get to recruiting as well. And it often goes, hand in hand or tandem. But once you've done this and made this decision that you're going to do it, communication, I think, is just the key thing with retention and keeping people on board, because a lot of organizations don't invest in their distribution center or their network until they absolutely need to. And sometimes the technology can be, 30 years old, can be 20 years old. So a lot of these employees and team members who are in these distribution and fulfillment centers or these warehouses, who, like you said, are going to make that quantum leap from, older technology to newer technology, they need to buy in, they need to be brought along, they need to be trained, they need to, have that great communication, to make sure that they are feeling comfortable with the technology change and the things that are going to happen there, right? So I think that's the first thing that you've got to look at. Now, to answer your question about recruiting and what companies are going to look for that are going to be making some of these changes, through our discussions that we have with organizations, and I won't name companies, but there's an organization that we're working with right now, and there's one that we partnered with last year to help roll out engineers in the field because the company's looking at adding new technologies, right? So they're working with integrators and they're working with some of the leading technology firms out there for like goods to person types of systems. So, when I partner with these companies or our firm partners with these companies, we want to understand where they currently are and what their current state is and what they're going to go to with the technology that they're implementing, whatever that may be. So it's very important to listen to our customers as a recruiting firm and find out what it is that they're looking for. But the common theme, again, to answer your question more directly, common theme that I'm going to find and we find out there is that if they're implementing, let's say a goods to person or a shuttle system or something like that, AMRs, whatever it may be, they would like to see some folks on the engineering team and on the maintenance team who have been there, done that. And that's a big thing. You can currently have a team, but they may not have gone through that kind of technology change before. And what companies ask for from our firm is for us to go out and find people who have been there, done that. You've worked for organizations, Joe. We've known each other a long time, but you've worked for organizations where you go in and there's a big change and people have not gone through that big change. So you've got that change management aspect of it. And again, our biggest ask that we get is we want somebody who's had to lead the implementation of a goods to person system from whatever manufacturer it is. That way they can help us with the pitfalls. So from the recruiting aspect, that's the big one.
It's more of you've had experience implementing technology, not you've done this specific technology in your past, right? Is that kind of the vibe?
It goes both ways. Again, a lot of companies and a lot of hiring managers are different. So, one that we partnered with here most recently, they were very open-minded to finding people with diverse sets of experience as long as they've been through the change. Then we have other people who say, well, we're going to be rolling out this warehouse management system. We need someone who has helped roll out this warehouse management system.
Okay. Interesting. Are you seeing the very specific skill set requests more on the software side or more on the mechanical technology side, or is it just both?
It's both, and again, it really comes down to whoever the architect is behind all of it and what their parameters are and what they have in their mind. And a lot of times, you work with these executives who have been in the business for 25 or 30 years. And I'm getting to that point in time, so I can understand it and relate to it a little bit more. But, once you've been around the block 3 or 4 times, your expectation of what you're looking for and what these execs are looking for are a little bit more open-minded. They're just looking for someone who has the breadth of experience and the horsepower, we'll say, to make that change happen and lead through it. And usually they don't care if it's the exact same system or technology, whether it's mechanical or IT. They just want someone who can lead through that change. Whereas I do find some of the folks who are younger in their executive experience or may have not been to the rodeo so many times, they want to make sure that they've got a full safe, setup. So, they're more the ones who are, yes, we're implementing Manhattan. We want somebody who has Manhattan. Yes, we're implementing Blue Yonder. We want somebody who's had Blue Yonder. So, whether it's a system or whether it's a piece of MHE or equipment, it just really depends on the hiring team, I think.
Okay. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit. As most operations are doing, automation is increasing kind of across the board. Some people are going from paper to WMS. Some people are going from maybe walkies to all the way to fully automated operations. Yeah. And so in general, the trend is that we're automating way more stuff than we used to, and we're doing it at a much higher clip than we used to.
Absolutely.
What skills are you seeing requested? So beyond the specific experience with having an implementation or working with X piece of software, what other skills are you seeing being requested more often now than maybe 10 or 15 years ago?
And you're talking about from a implementation and kind of a change in technology standpoint is what you're asking or saying more so?
Yeah. So you have a facility they're trying to staff up, or they've gone through some changes. And what are the kind of new skill sets that people are asking for that, like, in the past may not have been like the kind of primary?
Yeah. So again, you'll hear me talk about this a bit, but I think communication is king. It really has that's one thing that has not changed. Um, you know, the better the communication through the levels of management and through the ranks, the more informed people are going to be, the more people are going to be bought in, the more they're going to care, the more they're going to want to interact with the providers, with the integrators, with their leadership team, with the folks that report to them, with their matrixed organization, whatever it may be. So, I think communication is a constant, and I think that everybody has to have great communication skills when going through change. So I think that's probably the big one. To what you're getting at with, or what you're asking about from the technology standpoint, it's kind of back to what we were just discussing. I do find that hiring managers and hiring teams are really looking for 4 out of 5 of the top things that they're looking for. So if we're going through that change, I might on a common job intake call hear a couple of key phrases. So, one is we want somebody who's led through change management before. 2, we want somebody who's gone through an implementation of a new system or software, or done a new CapEx project and had to lead through that. And this can be on any scale. Joe, this goes, anywhere from a $3 or $4 million project, all the way up to building and implementing and opening up, some of the most cutting edge, $250 million buildings that are out there, right? So again, they're looking for these things, regardless of size of the operation, but they want that person who's been through the change management, who's implemented a certain technology or warehouse management system or software or something like that. And then communication is the other thing that they're looking for. So, if somebody has a background of going through these processes and leading through this change, that's usually the biggest thing that hiring teams are looking for, I find.
Okay, interesting. So what kind of there's only so many people that have like these specific set of experiences, right? And the logistics world's kind of a small world. I don't know everybody, but I've met a ton of people, and I end up seeing them at other places. Yep. Kind of the way of it. What are some of the challenges for finding people that fit all those requirements?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Great question. There are always challenges. And sometimes I think it's kind of cyclical as well. Sometimes it's harder than others. And there are a lot of factors that go into what makes it difficult at any given time. So you've got soft job markets, you've got tough job markets, right? So there could be a shortage of people. There could be, a gluttony of people out on the market with certain experiences. Where it can be tough is when you've got a newer technology or a newer company forming with a newer cutting edge technology that is new, that has not been implemented a lot out there. That's one where it can be tough to find the right person because they become more of a needle in a haystack. There are other organizations and other technologies that have been out there and out and about for years and years. I mean, I can name, a certain warehouse management system organization that's been around and has a big name, and, a lot of organizations have worked with it. So, it's not as hard to find those kinds of people. But candidate scarcity, I think, has been a real big issue, especially with the supply chain crunch that we had with COVID. It'd be hard not to do this podcast without talking about that impact. In 2020, I was 2 years into starting my own business, and I thought, geez, what if this fails? What if we go out of business? What if, I've due to timing, I've made a terrible mistake. But after about May of that year, things just blew up, and it was going crazy. And you being in the industry and being in the same sandbox that we're in, you know how it was. I mean, there was a shortage of people everywhere, and if I had a nickel for every time I heard the phrase "we need to reduce our dependency on labor," I could have retired by now. So, things like this, for instance, in the timing of COVID and a supply chain crunch, engineers were just in such high demand. So, I mean, there are companies that I worked with who needed a ton of design engineers, solutions engineers, mechanical engineers, systems people, and you just couldn't find them. The scarcity was there because every single company was trying to hire those folks to reduce dependency on labor, from 2020 to 2023, basically. And it's not discontinuing, even though the market is softening a little bit right now. When I say market, I'm talking about global financial markets. I mean, there is that impact that, our CEOs and the companies that we work with look at and say, you know what, right now is not the time. We've got some headwinds. We just need to hold steady. So we're not going to invest. But, for the last 3 years, if you had the money and the ROI, money was easy to get approved. You just couldn't find the people. So those are some of the difficulties that we work with, and some of the nuances, that we find, or I find, when doing job intake calls with your, execs out there, your VPs, your SVPs, EVPs, and such. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and it also kind of answered another question, which is, a lot of folks have this fear of automation, like it's going to take my job or it's going to eliminate this. And I think you kind of danced around a little bit, and we've seen it also. Like, typically, we can't find people, and a lot of it's very obvious when we're building an ROI for a customer. It's like that like floor labor, like where are the people to do this? Yeah. I would accept a longer ROI in this circumstance because I actually can't field enough staff to do it the traditional way, right? So let's automate it and reduce our requirement for labor. Do you have a lot of folks talking about like maintaining or job security questions, or is it primarily just I can't feed the beast with enough heads, enough engineering staff, enough floor labor?
Two different markets there from my standpoint. And again, as a caveat here, my organization, we staff only technical, engineering, management, and leadership, so salaried individuals. So I can't speak as much to the associate base and hiring for labor. What I do, and where I do find information on these kinds of topics, is by talking to my general managers, my directors, my vice presidents, all the people that I network with on a daily and weekly basis. It helps me gather information and kind of become that information maven of what is happening out there in the industry. And I'm able to keep my finger on the pulse of it, by having those conversations. But to answer your question, so many different retention tactics and recruiting tactics to get the right people on board over the last couple years. The big one that I have seen, especially on the technical side, and actually this goes with the associate side as well, but it's increase in wages. Right now we've seen inflation higher than most any other time we've seen in recent history, right? So with it being what it is right now, people's compensation and salaries aren't going as far as they used to. And you're feeling that. I just got back from vacation and I took my family of 5, albeit 3 boys that are teenagers, out for dinner, but we went to a fast food restaurant that, was sit down on the way back from our vacation, and it was $70 for 5 people, right? So, it's affecting everyone. So, salary increase, wage increase is competitive right now. That's something that's making things competitive. But even before inflation hit here recently, there was a war for talent, and in engineering specifically. Design folks and people who could look at a brownfield or look at, a green field, and they've gone through the design of these things over and over and over again. Maybe they work for an integrator, maybe they work for a third party provider, maybe they work for one of the MHE providers or something like that. I saw salaries, where people were making $120,000 as an engineer in 2018. By the time we got to 22, those same folks were able to command $165,000, $170,000 for a base salary. So I mean, there was that talent war that kind of drove that up, and a lot of that just had to do with again the shortage of good people when it came to being able to reduce dependency on labor, because everyone went to automate. I won't name the company, but one of them, I think they quadrupled their client spend on automation projects in about 2 years. They doubled it in 1 year and then doubled it again the year after that on the amount of, in millions, the amount of automation projects they were doing in their facilities.
Yeah, that kind of aligns with our experience. Like a lot of those things are what we do, and it's hard to find enough people to do all of the work that's out there. And a lot of it is like upgrading facility, or we're going to expand our network and we're going to expand it in an automated way. Interesting. So there's the kind of the front end design stuff, and I see a lot of that, and it kind of prompted the interview today. But what do you see on the kind of back end? Do you find that folks are putting more like post go live engineering resources into operations to try to get the most bang for their buck from these systems, or do you find that they want to automate it and get it stable and then move on to the next one and just kind of let it be what it is?
I'm going to throw that one back to you, Joe. I'm not there for the post. I'm there for the recruiting. I mean, my process in my company and our specialty is, finding the right people, presenting, the information to a potential candidate so that they're educated, and hopefully interested or compelled in an opportunity, enough to get them to interview and meet with the hiring team. We help, facilitate the interview process, and we help negotiate offers. And then, after that, I follow up with candidates to say, hey, how are you doing? How was the first month? Was onboarding okay? These kinds of things. And of course, I stay in contact with them. You've been a previous candidate that we've worked with successfully as well, years and years ago, whatever that was, 15 years ago. And here we are, 15 years later doing a podcast and staying in contact. So, that's what we do. I don't have a great answer for you on what organizations are doing as a follow-up or post-implementation to have the proper people on staff. That's less of where I'm involved.
Okay. Do you see a lot of industrial engineering type of opportunities for in a facility, in an operation, or do you see a lot more of I need somebody to design on the front end? I guess maybe that's probably a more fair question.
I mean, you get your larger organizations, name it, your Targets, your Amazons, your Walmarts, anything that's in the Fortune, let's call it maybe 150. They have their own engineering, they have their own IT, they have their own systems, they have their own army of people that are going to be doing these things, right? A lot of the mid-sized organizations, are going to have engineering support, and engineers, whether it be centralized at their corporate location or out in the field. It can be a mix. Sometimes they have field engineers where the field engineer handles 2 or 3 buildings and they travel, 50% of the time. So I see everything in between. But yes, they do want to have engineering support in these, mid-size. And when I say mid-size, I'm talking Fortune 200 to Fortune 500, maybe, let's call it. They do want to have engineering support in there to help with, just all the changes that you're going to have within the organization and all the standardization of processes and things of this nature. So yeah, you definitely are going to want to have some engineering and IT support in these buildings.
All right. Very cool. Let's take a second to try to talk about the future. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you do have your finger kind of on the pulse of the industry, right? Like where do you see like an increase in in requests, or where do you see like the industry going? We'll probably edit this part out because this is a rough question. You've already answered like 9 out of 10 of these.
Well, are you real quick? I mean, if we are going to edit it out, but are you talking engineering specifically, automation? Are you talking management and operations management? Are you talking like overall, or is there anywhere that you have in mind that you want to kind of dig into?
We like essentially a lot of the questions we end up like fielding from our customers are like ops management.
Mm-hmm.
Questions. So oftentimes, like they might have some like regional engineering support. And they don't do a ton with it. They might do a little bit with it. A 3PL obviously do a ton of engineering up front. Yep. When you do a direct customer, like they rely on us for a lot more of the engineering. It's the ops management piece of it, and like the kind of general skill set there that we get pinged about all the time. Like how do I find a supervisors to run something with a WMS? We were using paper before.
Right.
It's not the supervisor.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that's a request that we get a lot of. So and the fun thing is, and you see this from where you sit as well, but organizations go through these sea changes and these big changes every once in a while. An organization that might have a fleet of, let's call it 13 distribution and fulfillment centers throughout the United States, or even 6 of them, let's say. An organization like this is not going to upgrade their WMS, their LMS, their automation technology and their sortation and all these kinds of things, every 3 years, right? They're not going to do one of these big jumps, every 3 years. It's something that happens, when you're going through a tremendous amount of growth. There are certain organizations out there that are opening up more stores, or it's an online retailer and sales are through the roof. They're opening up new, fulfillment centers left and right, selling dog food and cat food online, things of this nature. So tremendous growth is driving it. The other thing that drives it is, hey, we did that tremendous growth and we were a growth company back in 2000 to 2008, let's say we were big in housing and, home improvement and things of this nature. You build out your entire network. And then, once you stop building your network, 10 years later, 15 years later, you're looking at it as an executive and going, we've got some older technology and it's starting to cost us a little bit more than what it would be as if we invested in some new technology right now. Right. So these are a couple of the common areas where I see organizations asking for specific types of people and operations like you're talking about. So if we're going through that change, you talk about the front end engineering, and if it's, again, a big organization, they might do it in-house. Mid-sized or small organization, they might work with an integrator or a small consulting firm. There's small consulting firms that have 5 people out there, like my organization, that play in the sandbox as well. But either way, you're going to get that on the front end with the engineering and the design and the integration and these kinds of things. Once you've got that selected, what you need from an operational standpoint, whether it's supervisors or managers, is again that person who's been through the change. It's somebody who has seen a change in technology. I also, from the people standpoint of it, get a lot of discussion around, this is a building that we opened in, 1994. It's in a rural area. We have a number of associates who have worked there for 20 years. We just had people who have celebrated, 20 years there. They got a certificate. They got an extra week off. They got, a bonus, whatever it is that they do to celebrate or recognize people that are there for 20 years. But I get the request of, we're going to be going through a lot of change. And we have people on board who are supervisors and even operations managers who have come up in the organization with the company. And they've not had to go through that change. So what we want you to do, SER or SE Recruit, is to help us identify some leaders that we can bring in, for each of our shifts, where, we can have that person come in and really help lead through the change, through the technology change, through the addition of the new, sortation system, the new Bombay sorter, the new goods to person, the new robotics, whatever. So we do get that request quite often from an operational standpoint where they're looking for somebody who's had that type of experience to help lead. And if you have 20 supervisors in a building, let's say you're operating a 1,000,000 square foot facility with a couple shifts, you might have 20 supervisors. They're not asking us to help find, 20 supervisors. They're asking us to help find maybe 2 or 3 or 4 that, can help the other supervisors, lead through those types of situations.
Okay, so that's it. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually had not thought about it that way. So you're just sprinkling in a couple of folks that have that experience to help kind of spread the experience across everybody. So essentially, people that have done it before are going to show everybody else like what that looks like, help you kind of level set, and then they kind of just stay in the organization after that, I assume.
Typically. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a talent standpoint, you've got people who have the potential to develop and move, right? They have some upward mobility. They're open to relocation. They've been through technological changes. They've done management rotations. They've done these kinds of things that give them exposure to a lot of different areas that make them a little bit more valuable. There are certain people who want to be the supervisor or the ops manager, and they're open to working that on second shift for the next 10 years, and that's what they want to do. So, everyone's different. People are different, but it does help when you have, a high caliber individual who can, bring in a good cultural leadership piece of the puzzle, as well as, oh yeah, I just did this, last year with my previous organization. Here's some of the issues that we ran into, and here's how we can avoid them if we, do this the smart way. So it is definitely valuable to bring people in and sprinkle them in, as you said, into these locations that may have a more tenured workforce.
Do you find yourself looking for people that focus exclusively on change management? Or is it typically like, let's find somebody that's experienced, put them in there, and that will kind of provide enough change management?
Yeah. Again, when we do a job intake with any organization, like if you were going to hire us to help you fill some positions, I'm going to be asking, one of our key questions is, what are the 3 or 4 most important things you are expecting this person to accomplish? What are the 3 or 4 most important traits you're looking for this person to be able to bring to the table? What are the previous experiences that you're looking for this person to have that will help you in your organization, be successful, right? So as we ask these questions, we're getting a lot of the soft skills as well as the technical skills. And if you're on the operations side, a lot of it is the soft skills. If you're a supervisor, an ops manager, an assistant general manager, a director, somebody running a building, you're in the field, you've got to have those soft skills to be able to work with your team. And again, it goes back to communication, as I mentioned before. You've got to have great communication skills, especially for our frontline leaders out there. They've got to be able to communicate, have good follow-up skills, and really take care for the people that are working, alongside them out on that shift. When you get more into that, director level, and, we're talking with executives who are looking for a director, they have to have the soft skills. They usually like for those folks to have come up through the ranks and understand the operations, the metrics, the mathematics behind it, have that business acumen. But that's where that goes to that next level. You've got to have that business acumen, the decision making, not just the day to day, but the long-term vision and what are the goals for, this building. And, you've got to have that maturity as well as a director or a vice president out there to say, okay, this building is not going to be the same as this building. This building has a population who's been working here for 30 years. That's different than a startup building. This building's had a union attempt. This one has not, so on and so forth. So, you've got to understand those nuances a little bit more the higher up you go. But still, communication, I think, is one of the biggest things that we hear on that. Change management, which we've already touched on, is another piece of that. They don't necessarily have to have it, but if you've got a building that's going to be going through a lot of change, they'd love to see somebody with that.
So we talked about like who these people are, and maybe how you find them a little bit. When should you do this? Like let's say we're building a greenfield. When should we try to bring in these new resources with the type of experiences that like the customers desire? Should we do that in the concepting and design phase, or should we, let that design work kind of happen and then bring them in for the startup phase, or like where do you kind of see the optimal timeline there?
So if you were an integrator making a recommendation to a client on when to bring some of these folks in, you guys as the integrator, you guys are going to have the engineering and the technology piece of it on your side. If you're already going to have that to begin with, if the customer does not have, and again, let's say it's a smaller organization, an organization that has not had a lot of change in the last 7 or 8 years, very stable state, type of organization, you really are going to want to bring somebody in as soon as you can. And it really needs to be a discussion. You really have to look at each organization and each structure and each company and each culture and figure out what's going to be best. So again, I think for us, from where I sit, that's where we can help organizations say, okay, well, what are you guys doing right now? What's your stable state look like? What kind of technology are you bringing in? Hey, do you have anyone on staff who's done that before? You don't. Okay. Well, I would make a recommendation that you're at least going to need somebody, in operations management, who's been through that. Hopefully your director, hopefully your general manager has been around the block or to enough rodeos to understand and know how to lead through these things. But at a minimum, you're going to need, somebody in an operations management standpoint or position who can say, yeah, this is how we did this the last time I did it. Definitely do not do that. We've got to make sure we get that data correct. If we do not get that data correct, it's going to corrupt the other data downstream. So this is very important. You've got to make sure that we get this right. So everyone make sure you got your data correct when it comes to this. So, I think the sooner you can hire that person who has that project management experience or who has that experience of going through a go live and implementation or something like that, the better.
Okay, that's excellent. One kind of like note that we often say to our customers is while we're going through that concepting phase, and definitely when we're going through the startup and commissioning phase, there is just this wealth of free training, and we're going to go through it. This is why all this stuff works this way. Right. This is how you, it could be something very technical. This is how you reset a robot. And this is how you reconfigure XYZ. It could be, this is all the math behind why this system flows the way it does. And we're, at Hy-Tek, more than happy to share that with our end customers, because we think the more educated they are, the better the system's going to run.
Absolutely.
So I love that, kind of both those recommendations mirror one another. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Data. You put trash in, you get trash out. You put gold in, you get gold out. And, again, the better people are trained, the better success rate they're going to have, the better it is for you, the better it is for them. It becomes a win-win situation. And I mean, that's the goal, right? Everybody wants to win.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Brett, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. I think this was super helpful. A lot of your points were very well reinforced, and I think that it gave me a pretty good idea, and it's going to help me talk to my customers more. And for anybody watching out there, I think it's going to give a lot of insights into maybe when to start looking, who to start looking for, and how to have that conversation. And definitely reach out to Brett.
Yeah, that too. Feel free to reach out if you need anything for your recruiting needs. And yeah, absolutely, Joe. Thanks for having me on, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Love to do it again on a different topic or a similar topic. But thanks again for having me.